Fernando Alonso stormed to a spectacular 99th podium finish of his career in Sunday's season-opening Bahrain Grand Prix. What does Verstappen think of Alonso's brilliant performance in Bahrain? Let's find out. The F1 2023 season kicked off with high expectations for Red Bull and Max Verstappen, the reigning two-time world champion, who started from pole position. The team's long-run pace looked promising during testing, leading many to predict a dominant performance in the first race. These predictions proved to be accurate, as Verstappen managed to hold on to his lead at the start and gradually extended the gap over Ferrari Charles Leclerc. Eventually, the Dutch driver pulled away from the pack, leaving the others in his dust. His teammate Sergio Perez overtook Leclerc to claim second place, cementing Red Bull's dominance on the track. Unfortunately for Leclerc, his power unit failed, forcing him to retire from the race. This left Verstappen and Perez to claim a commanding 1-2 finish for Red Bull, with Verstappen crossing the line 12 seconds ahead of his teammate. It was an impressive start to the season for the Red Bull team, and a clear sign that they will be a force to be reckoned with in the upcoming races. The AMR 23 was the second quickest car last Sunday, and had it not been for Lance Stroll tagging his teammate as Alonso tried to cut back against Hamilton's surprise early pass at Bahrain's famous Turn 4, things might have been closer with Red Bull than even the mighty Leclerc was managing. The result surely wouldn't have changed, but Alonso estimated he lost 10 to 15 seconds on all those battles, fighting the Mercedes cars after so nearly being punted out of the race by the injured Stroll, who deserves huge praise for the brave and brilliant performance he put in with 2 broken wrists and a broken toe around that. Without that time loss, and assuming he'd have dispatched the struggling Carlos Sainz reasonably quickly, Alonso could have gotten amongst the Leclerc-Perez battle for second. After Alonso's amazing performance, Max Verstappen admitted that he hopes to see Fernando Alonso as a contender for the F1 Championship. When asked if he would like to see Alonso battle for the title in 2023, Verstappen said, "I hope so for Fernando as well, because he has had a few years where there was not really a possibility to fight at the front. So I'm happy to see him sitting here already in race 1. With Alonso and Lance Stroll finishing in P3 and P6 respectively for Aston Martin, Verstappen spoke highly of the British outfit. He commented, "At Aston Martin, they really have the spirit and drive. They want to win, and they've hired a lot of good people, so I guess it can only get better for them." The Dutchman would not rule out the possibility of Alonso's team claiming some victories during the 2023 campaign. Verstappen continued, "For this year, it's difficult to say if they're going to challenge for the championship, but race wins are definitely on the table. I've been in the same position where some races I'm finishing 20 to 40 seconds behind the winners, and you still win 2 or 3 races a year because sometimes there are some tracks which really suit your car, and everything just comes together, and you can win a race with maybe sometimes a bit of help or luck. But for sure, they have a really strong package, and now of course it's all about developing it further." Perez was similarly pleased to see Alonso and Aston Martin succeed in Bahrain, and the Mexican expects the team, whom he raced for in their days as Force India Racing Point, to pose a challenge at certain tracks. Perez said, "I'm first of all very happy to see Aston and Fernando up here. I think it's been a tremendous effort, and it's great to see Fernando in his first race for the team on the podium. I think they certainly have a very good car. They will be a contender for sure in a few tracks. The seasons in Formula 1 are extremely long, so anything can happen." Returning to speculation's realm, consider what might have happened had Alonso started third or even second, as he managed for Alpine in Canada last year. The relentless, tenacious veteran may well have found a way to attack Verstappen. Although that theory is tempered by the knowledge that Alonso is clever enough to realize there's no point risking a hefty haul just for short-lived glory. He said as much when discussing his brilliant passes on Hamilton and Sainz post-race last Sunday. Alonso reflected, "With these great drivers, great champions, it is more intense and more adrenaline when you are wheel to wheel. I didn't want to have any mistakes or any contact, because obviously when you are P12, you lose nothing, but we were fighting for big things." Alonso is also adamant there's also more to come from the Aston package, which he claims is 95% new compared to 2022's green Red Bull. A tag Verstappen squad hasn't forgotten, judging by Perez's press conference quip, "It was nice to see 3 Red Bull cars on the podium." If that's true, the AMR 23 may well have a higher development ceiling compared to cars from teams deploying evolution designs such as Ferrari and Mercedes, which may be about to abandon what clearly doesn't work, and Red Bull itself. That could make things more interesting down the line. But for all his pumped up team radio messages and almost brutally happy hug with Aston Martin owner Lawrence Stroll on the grid ahead of Sunday's race, Alonso is sagely staying cautious when discussing what his green team can achieve in 2023. His race in Bahrain wasn't perfect. Think those 2 wild Turn 4 slides while battling Hamilton and Sainz. In the first, he nearly dropped his car while booting on the power. which he put down to getting used to the car and things that are not 100% tailor-made yet. In terms of him needing to adapt to how the Aston delivers its Mercedes engine grunt differently to the Alpine Renault package he was used to. It clearly does this very powerfully compared with the rest, judging by the GPS telemetry traces logged in Bahrain, where the Aston was clocked positively, punching off the slower corners. This boosted its excellent braking stability, which meant Alonso generally braked later than any of his rivals. Plus, the Bahrain track surface may too have flattered Aston, although it should be noted its package is very kind on its rubber and has been for some time, even going back to its Force India Racing Point days in the previous rules era. And the AMR 23 is draggy, which meant it wasn't a match for the Red Bull, Ferrari or Mercedes cars in a straight line in Bahrain, and this forced Alonso to get creative with his passing. This was particularly the case with Hamilton, and it was wonderful to watch such brilliant drivers battle closely for so long and keep it clean too. Back to the drag problem. This may temper Aston's expectations at the higher speed venues now up next. Although it's hard to imagine Alonso objecting to the new 4th DRS zone in Melbourne, as he apparently did last year, given with it, the Aston can dump its drag for longer around Albert Park in qualifying and race battles. Let's not forget how good Red Bull was last weekend. Aston team principal Mike Crack said in the Bahrain paddock post-race in an impromptu standing outdoors media scrum, with the team's hospitality building still packed with celebrating guests, that Red Bull might have been even further ahead given we don't know how much management they had to do and did. But even if at full whack, Red Bull is rather untouchable in 2023. Alonso being around the top positions regularly would be box office for F1. And Aston's leap up the pecking order is already providing inspiration to other long midfield mired squads hoping to one day do likewise. Unsurprisingly, Helmut Marko believes that Fernando Alonso could have made life more difficult for Red Bull in the Bahrain Grand Prix had it not been for the Spaniards' issues at the start. Marko, I think Alonso would have been much stronger if he didn't drop back further at the start. It was a fantastic fight with Lewis Hamilton after that. Tough but fair, and nice and old school. Of course, that did cost him time and tyres. That means that if he had been right behind us, the challenge for us would have been much greater. I don't know how much further development there will be, but at least with his age, he doesn't have to worry. He is in the form of his life. We know Red Bull was running roughly 12 kilograms overweight last season, with much of their off-season dedicated to getting close to the weight limit. Meanwhile, the Ferrari was closer to their weight targets in 2022, electing to focus more on engine power and reliability during the winter break. The data seems to match up as Leclerc's quickest lap in Q3, compared to Verstappen's effort, shows how the Ferrari was superior on all the main straights around the Bahrain International Circuit, reaching a top speed of 298 km per hour in the speed trap compared to 295 for Verstappen. This was the opposite last season as the RB18 gained the most on the straights compared to the F175, while Leclerc caught up through the high-speed sections and on the corner exit. This time, the downforce from the RB19 is where Verstappen gains the most on Leclerc, particularly through the high-speed turn 7 and turn 12. Verstappen has much better acceleration out of the tricky turn 10, where drivers often lock up upon entry, but Leclerc gains most of the time down the straight into turn 11. Verstappen is notably 10 km quicker into the braking zone of turn 13. The downforce of the RB19 showing its hand yet again, but this is short-lived once the SF23 uses its low drag setup and superior acceleration into turn 14. His acceleration onto the start-finish straight is 6 km per hour faster, but it's not long before Leclerc can go quicker, just before the final timing line. Now over to you. Do you think Alonso's Aston Martin has what it takes to compete against Red Bull? Let us know what you think in the comment section below.